Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing well. I've decided I'm going to start a short podcast that is going to discuss different topics of history of music. My idea was that we're going to go through the ages. We're going to start with ancient music history, and the lectures are going to be very brief. So don't worry about this. I hope you're going to like it, and then at the end of each lecture I will just give you some suggestions on what you might listen to, or have some questions of things that you could send me, things that you could research and send me after that. But it's really nothing that you have to worry. It's not going to be a major thing. My idea was mainly to have something that you could listen to, something that you could put on your phone, or I've not decided. Probably I might upload these things on YouTube, and then you can listen through that, while you're just having a walk, or I don't know. I was hoping that you might find them interesting, and it's going to be in a different format than what we usually have in our lessons. So, let's give it a go. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It's not a problem. For as long as we've been around to enjoy it, music has been a part of human history. We play music to tell stories, for religious reasons, and often just for fun. Thousands of years ago, ancient people invented all kinds of musical instruments and figured out that math and music are related. So, if you want to get better with your instrument, make sure that you do your maths homework as well. That's not a joke, actually. There's a lot of different correlations between maths and music. By the late 15th century, however, music was changing like never before. Beginning in the 1600s, the Baroque era delivered the first operas, overtures, and concertos, and it gave us complex and beautiful music that's still played today. It's very difficult to choose a beginning for where to start. There's a lot of historical findings of different instruments, and I'm sure I will cover some of them later in this podcast. But it's safe to assume that the first musical instrument was the human voice. The earliest singers were talking between 50,000 and 200,000 years ago, were probably accompanying themselves by clapping their hands or banging rocks to keep the beat while they're singing. Flutes made of bones were also discovered in caves in Germany. They're so old that we don't even know whether humans or our earlier ancestors, such as the Neanderthals, played on them. I will narrow down our topic today to a place that historians call the music cradle. Now, that's a geographic area where the world's oldest civilizations in Mesopotamia, Egypt, northern India, and China developed musical traditions. Although the sound of their music has been lost, surviving artifacts shows the vigor of music making in these ancient societies. So around 4,500 years ago, so a long time ago, hundreds of musicians worked in the service of the priests and secular rulers of the Sumerian city of Ur in southern Mesopotamia, which, if you want to find it on today's map, you have to look at modern-day Iraq. Singing played a key role in religious rituals, and court musicians provided accompaniment for state ceremonies and banquets. If you're unfamiliar with the word banquets, that's like big parties for the rulers of that time. Rulers and rich people, really, as always. The standard of Ur, a Sumerian artifact, is now in the British Museum. So if you want, you can go and have a look once the lockdown is over. And that standard of Ur shows a lyre player and a singer entertaining the king at a feast. The lyre was a very famous at the time instrument that looks like a small harp, and people used to use it a lot because it was very easy to accompany yourself while you're singing, or if you are reciting a poem. A few beautiful made Sumerian lyres have survived into the present day, so we can see them, and they're the oldest existing string instruments. The Sumerians also played harps and lutes, plus varieties of wooden flutes and reed pipes. Percussion included drums, tambourines, clappers, and a kind of metal shaker known as a sistrum. I apologize if I don't pronounce it correctly, but I believe that's how it's pronounced. Instructions for performance have been found on Sumerian clay tablets. Succeeding civilizations in Mesopotamia and its surrounding area continued and expanded this musical tradition. The Assyrian kings, dominant in the area from 2000 years before Christ to 700 years before Christ, maintained a court orchestra. That's very interesting, actually, because a long time ago they still had orchestras. So the Assyrian kings maintained a court orchestra and choir that sometimes gave public performances to gladden the hearts of the people. Musicians also accompanied the Assyrian army on its many campaigns with drums and trumpets used to signal simple orders and messages. If you think about it, that stayed throughout the years, as we can see in a lot of historical movies or read in a lot of historical books, that musicians are accompanying the army on the battlefield. However, music was not restricted to courts and temples. Shepherds played pipes while minding their flocks, and singing and drumming accompanied heavy work in the fields. There must have been a wide range of musical expression because of the variety of purposes for which music was considered appropriate, from celebrating a victory at war to helping induce sleep. If you think about it, we're still using music for pretty much the same reasons nowadays. I mean, everybody is listening to their favorite songs while going to school or going to work. I like listening to some music when I'm relaxing. People are listening to a lot of music when they're meditating. Or when they're in the gym. So there's a lot of different variety of options and different musical styles that music is used for. So that's not changed much in the last 6,000 years, which I think is fascinating. Professional musicians, very similar to nowadays, were trained at music schools and probably organized into guilds. In Egypt, music enriched the myths of the many of their Egyptian gods. Osiris, the god of the afterlife, for example, was known as the lord of the sistrum, which is that little metal shaker I was telling you about earlier. Egyptian priests and priestesses intoned hymns to the gods as part of their daily duties, as well as at special festivals. At court, the chief musicians had a high status and formal rank. Egyptian instruments were similar to those of the Mesopotamian states, but the harp was more developed. For example, by the 1200 BC, some of their harps were 6 feet high, which is quite a big instrument. The music of ancient Egypt changed little over the centuries, with tradition upheld by the academies that trained musicians. There must have been a freer popular tradition, however, for Egyptian paintings show peasants dancing to pipes and drums. Music was seen by ancient Chinese philosophers as reflecting the fundamental order of the universe. China's imperial rulers were convinced that correct performance of ritual music was essential to upholding the harmony of the state. From the 1st century before Christ, court and military music was strictly directed and regulated by the Imperial Bureau of Music. However, most music escaped official control. The Chinese opera developed from the 3rd century before Christ, and from the Tang dynasty, a popular music scene flourished in Chinese cities. Looking around the world, we can see that ancient people had very different explanations for where music came from. The ancient Egyptians believed that the goddess Hathor invented music. Um, an ancient Chinese legend says that music was invented by an old man named Ling Lun, who made bamboo pipes tuned to the songs of birds. In a nearer civilization of ancient Greek, they thought that god Hermes invented the lyre, or in another of the Greek myths, Orpheus was a musician who sang and played music so beautifully that even animals were charmed by him. So there's a lot of different explanations, but we can't be sure where was the first place that music was born. In my personal opinion, I believe that it happened in many places. I don't think that people can exist without music, without singing a song, or without playing an instrument. So I'm sure that that happened in a lot of different places at the same time. Now, before I finish that first trial podcast thingy, I would like to share with you what is considered to be the oldest melody out there, and it's called the Hurrian Hymn number 6. It was composed by the ancient Hurrians, sometimes around the 14th century before Christ, and the clay tablets containing the tune were excavated in the 1950s from the ruins of a city of Ugarit in Syria. Along with a near complete set of musical notations, they also include specific instructions to how to play the song on a type of 9-string lyre. So I will let you listen that. I will upload the link to a YouTube recording of it, and please let me know what your thoughts of it are. And also, what do you think about this podcast? Do you think you'd like to listen to some more stories? My idea was to go through the different periods of time until we reach all the modern artists that we know but might learn more about. So, yes, let me know, and goodbye.